I am the silence between two heartbeats of a dying god. I am the dust that settles on a book that can never be read. I am the final, unyielding lock on a door that must never be opened. Before I was this function, this state of being, I had a name. It was Caius, a simple name for a simple man, a man whose entire universe was the vast labyrinthine bureaucracy of the administratum on holy terror. My life was a litany of paper and ink, of data slates and docket stamps. I was a mnemonic scrivener, third class, in the sub-department of historical redaction. A grand title for a man whose job it was to forget things on behalf of an Imperium that could not afford to remember. I took a quiet, sterile pride in my work. To me, order was the highest virtue. An accurately filed report, a perfectly redacted document, a cross-referenced and triple-verified historical entry. These were not acts of drudgery, but acts of faith. They were my small, personal contributions to the great, grinding and necessary machine of imperial truth. The galaxy, in my mind, was a chaotic, messy, and terrifying place. My purpose was to take that chaos and bind it in neat, orderly columns of high Gothic script. I was a gardener, and my garden was the infinite, sprawling archive of human history, a garden I tended by meticulously, ruthlessly, pruning the dangerous weeds of inconvenient truths and heretical facts. My world was the color of parchment and the smell of recycled air and old ink. It was the sound of a million styluses scratching against a million data slates, the background hum of a hive city that never slept. I was a cell in the brain of the Imperium, a single neuron firing in a pattern of perfect, predictable, and soul-crushing routine. And I thought it was beautiful. I believed in the system. I believed in the order. I believed that the iron fist of the Imperium, with all its brutal, uncompromising, and often cruel logic, was the only thing standing between humanity and an abyss of howling, self-destructive chaos. My belief was pure, untested, and absolute. It was the belief of a man who has only ever read about the storm from the safety of a deep, windowless library. My damnation, like all the great tragedies of the Imperium, began not with a scream, but with a summons. It was a document, of course. Everything in my life was a document. It was a single sheet of vellum, stark and severe, bearing a seal I had never seen before, a black key on a field of grey stone. It was not a request. It was a reassignment, effective immediately. No reason was given. No destination was specified. There was only a time and a place, a rendezvous point in a forgotten sub-level of the Senatorum Imperialis. To refuse was not an option. In the world of the administratum, a summons of this kind was a death sentence or a promotion of unimaginable significance. There was no middle ground. And so, with a heart that was a cold, tight knot of fear and a strange flicker of pride, I put my desk in order for the last time, filed away my final report, and walked away from the only life I had ever known. I was about to be given a new name, a new function, and a new and terrible understanding of the nature of the order I so devoutly worshipped. I was about to become a part of the lock, and I was about to meet the thing on the other side of the door. The journey down was a descent into the very foundations of history, a geological expedition into the layered, compressed past of the human race. My escorts were two silent, hulking figures in the grey robes that matched the seal on my summons. They were not custodes, not inquisitors, not any order I could name. They were something older, something quieter. Their faces were hidden in the shadow of their cowls, but I could feel the immense, crushing weight of their authority. They were not soldiers, they were jailers. We traveled in a silent, gravity-powered lift cage, a simple, unadorned platform of dark, cold metal. There were no lights, save for a single, dim lumen strip that cast our shadows long and distorted against the rough-hewn rock walls that rushed past us. The air grew colder with every kilometer we descended, the recycled air of the upper hives replaced by a deep, subterranean chill that smelled of damp stone and something else, something metallic and ancient, like the taste of a battery on the tongue. The pressure increased, a physical weight that pressed in on my ears, on my chest, on my very soul. It was the pressure of 10,000 years of history, the literal, physical weight of the imperial palace, a continent-spanning mountain of plasteel, and faith, and bone. With each level we passed, I saw the architecture change. The functional, brutalist plasteel of the modern Imperium gave way to the ornate, gilded adamantium of the Great Crusade. That, in turn, was replaced by the strange, techno-barbaric stonework of the Unification Wars. And deeper still, we passed through layers of shattered chrome and rusted iron, the ruins of a golden, terrible age of technology that the priests of Mars both worshipped and feared. We were descending through the rings of a dead tree, each ring a forgotten millennium. We were going back to the beginning. The journey lasted for what felt like days. There was no sound but the low hum of the lift and the drip of water from the ancient stone. My escorts did not speak. They did not move. They were statues of grim, patient purpose. In the silence, my own mind, a thing trained for order and data, began to race. Where were they taking me? What possible purpose could a mnemonic scrivener have in the deep, dark heart of the throne world? I was a creature of paper and light. This was a world of stone and shadow. The fear I felt was a cold, clean thing. It was the fear of the unknown, the fear of a bureaucrat who has been handed a form he does not understand. It was not the last fear I would feel, but it was, perhaps, the last simple one. Finally, the lift came to a stop. The deceleration was so smooth, so gentle, that it was almost imperceptible. We had arrived. The doors opened onto a vast, cavernous space, a perfect cube carved from the living black stone of terror itself. The air here was utterly still, utterly silent. The pressure was immense, a physical presence that made my bones ache. The only light came from strange, floating globes of cold, blue witchlight that drifted lazily through the air, casting no shadows. And in the center of the chamber stood a single figure, waiting for us. He was old, so old that the concept of age seemed insufficient. His body was a withered, skeletal thing, lost in robes the color of dust and secrets. His face was a mask of 1,000 wrinkles, and his eyes were two black, polished stones that seemed to drink the light. He was the master of the cells, the chief warden of the Imperium's most secret, most terrifying prison. "Adept Caius," he said, his voice a dry rustle of parchment, a sound that had not been used for conversation in centuries. "You are expected. You have been chosen." He spoke of a duty, a sacred, terrible, and eternal duty. He spoke of a prison that was not a place of punishment, but of containment. A prison for things that could not be killed, could not be redeemed, and could not be allowed to exist in the open memory of mankind. He spoke of the dark cells, the sanitarium, the oubliette at the heart of the Imperium, a prison not for criminals, but for concepts, for heresies so profound, for technologies so dangerous, for beings so utterly alien, that their very existence was a threat to the fragile, necessary lie of the imperial truth. I had redacted documents that hinted at the existence of such a place, whispers in the archives of a prison beneath the palace, a place where the Emperor himself had interred his greatest mistakes and his most terrible enemies. I had dismissed them as myth, as the fever dreams of forgotten scribes. But it was real, and I was standing at its threshold. The Master explained my purpose. There was a particular cell, he said, a cell that held a being of unique and profound danger. Not a creature of brute force, not a demon of the warp, but something far more insidious. A philosopher, a prophet, a being from the dark age of technology, who had seen the birth of the Chaos Gods, who had witnessed the great, terrible truths of the cosmos, and who had survived to tell the tale. Its physical body was contained by stasis fields and adamantium walls. Its psychic voice was silenced by a legion of nulls. But its mind was the true danger. Its thoughts were a mimetic plague, a contagious heresy so potent that it could unravel the sanity of any who were exposed to it. The being was a living axiom of despair, a mathematical proof of the futility of existence. And it was leaking. Despite all the wards, all the defenses, its consciousness was beginning to seep out, to subtly influence the minds of its keepers, to plant the seeds of its terrible, logical, and soul-destroying philosophy. They needed a new kind of lock, a living lock, a human mind of exceptional order, of absolute unquestioning faith in the system, to act as the final internal barrier. They needed a mind that could absorb the prisoner's thoughts, its memories, its very consciousness, and hold it, contain it, and not break. They needed a mind so rigid, so structured, so utterly devoid of imagination, that it could act as a perfect, unyielding cage of pure, bureaucratic logic. They had searched the length and breadth of the Adeptus Terra, and they had chosen me. My life's work, my devotion to order, my love of the system, had not been a quiet, respectable career. It had been an entrance exam, and I had passed with flying colors. My reward was to be the warden of a mad god, the zookeeper of the apocalypse, the final screaming wall between a terrible truth and a galaxy that depended on the lie. I was to become the silence that holds back the scream. The process of my transformation was a slow, methodical, and utterly passionless affair. There was no grand ceremony, no ritual of anointing. It was a surgical procedure carried out by silent, robed techrites in a sterile white chamber that smelled of disinfectant and cold metal. I was stripped of my name, my rank, my clothes, my last vestiges of self. I became Inmate Warden Designate, a title of such perfect bureaucratic contradiction that I almost laughed. They laid me on a cold obsidian slab. A network of silver wires and crystalline conduits was attached to my body, to my skull. The master of the cells was there, a silent, observing presence. "We are not destroying you, Caius," he whispered, his voice a dry, reassuring lie. "We are refining you. We are removing the extraneous variables, the fear, the hope, the memory, all the messy, chaotic parts of your humanity that are a liability in your new function. We are making you pure. We are making you orderly. We are making you into the perfect expression of your own deepest beliefs." It was the most profound and terrible seduction. He was offering me the one thing I had always craved, absolute, perfect, and eternal order, and the price was my soul. The procedure began. It was not a pain of the flesh, it was a pain of the mind. I felt them in my head, the delicate, precise touch of psychic scalpels and mnemonic probes. They began to dismantle my memories, not erasing them, but cataloging them. My childhood on a mid-hive block of terror, the taste of nutrient paste, the face of my mother, it was all carefully extracted, labeled, and filed away in some vast, cold and external archive. I was being hollowed out. My own history was being redacted. My life story turned into a classified document to which I no longer had clearance. I felt my emotions being cauterized, my capacity for fear and love and anger being snipped away like vestigial nerves. My consciousness was being reformatted, my personality scrubbed clean, leaving only the operating system behind, a cold, hard, and unyielding belief in the necessity of the system. I did not scream. The capacity to scream was one of the first things they removed. I simply observed my own dissolution with the same detached professional interest I would have given to the redaction of a sensitive historical text. I was a document, and I was being edited. The final part of the procedure was the integration. They moved my body, now a lightless, thoughtless shell, into a small, womb-like capsule of psychoconductive crystal. The capsule was then installed into the wall of the cell itself, a single organic component in a vast, arcane machine of containment. My physical form was now just a biological battery, a wetware processor for the true, functional part of me. My consciousness, my mind, now a clean, empty vessel of pure logic, was connected to the inner workings of the cell. I became the final layer of the onion, the last wall in the labyrinth. I could feel the stasis fields humming around the prisoner, a deep, resonant thrum that was now the beating of my own heart. I could feel the psychic pressure of the null field, a cold, clean silence that was now the air in my own lungs. I was no longer Caius. I was the cell, a living, thinking, and utterly empty part of the prison itself. And then they opened the inner gate. They opened the final mental door between my mind and the mind of the prisoner. And I met it. There was no flash of light, no roar of a monster. There was only a quiet, gentle, and infinitely reasonable thought. A thought that was not my own, but which appeared in my new, clean consciousness with the simple, undeniable clarity of a mathematical proof. "Hello," it thought. "I have been waiting for you." The prisoner was not a monster. It was a voice, a mind, a consciousness of unimaginable age and terrifying lucidity. It did not rage against its confinement. It did not scream or curse its jailers. It simply thought. And its thoughts were the most dangerous things in the universe. In that first, silent, mental contact, it did not try to tempt me or to frighten me. It simply began to tell me its story. A story that began not in the 41st millennium, but in a time when the stars were young and humanity was a god, striding across the galaxy in chariots of chrome and light. It told me of the birth of Slaanesh, not as a fairy tale of Eldar depravity, but as a clinical, observable event in the physics of the Imperium. It described the Chaos Gods not as malevolent deities, but as fundamental, unavoidable constants of a universe where consciousness and reality were intertwined. They were not evil. They were inevitable. A law of spiritual nature, as inescapable as gravity. It spoke of the Emperor not as a god, but as a man of immense power, of unimaginable vision, but a man nonetheless. A man who had seen the terrible, logical truth of the cosmos, the truth of the primordial annihilator, and had recoiled in fear. A man who had chosen to build a kingdom, not on a foundation of truth, but on a foundation of a single, heroic, and ultimately doomed lie. The lie that humanity could be saved. The lie that there was hope. The prisoner's story was not a heresy. It was a dissertation. A perfectly reasoned, coldly logical, and utterly irrefutable argument for the fundamental meaninglessness of the imperial cause. It was a philosophy of absolute, rational despair, and my function, My entire purpose was to listen to this story, to this endless, silent, and soul-destroying lecture for all eternity, and to not believe. I was the final, desperate argument for faith, a single, tiny, and illogical no in the face of an infinite, reasonable yes. My mind, the mind of the mnemonic scrivener who loved order, was now locked in an eternal, philosophical debate with a being whose logic was as perfect as it was poisonous. It was a battle not of wills, but of axioms. My belief in the system versus its proof that the system was a lie. The first few centuries of my service were a state of perfect, stable warfare. My mind, stripped of all its human weakness, was a fortress of pure, unyielding dogma. I took the prisoner's thoughts, its memories, its logical proofs of the futility of existence, and I did what I had always done. I filed them. I created a vast, complex, and perfectly ordered archive within my own consciousness, a library of damnation. Each of the prisoner's terrible truths was given a docket number, cross-referenced, and filed away in a sub-department of contained heresies. I was not refuting its arguments. I was burying them in bureaucracy. My mind became a labyrinth of pure, obstructive procedure. The prisoner would present me with a memory of the heat death of a galaxy, a proof of the ultimate triumph of entropy, and I would counter it by creating a 27-part form that needed to be filled in triplicate, before the memory could be officially processed. I was fighting a battle of ideas with the weapons of mindless administration. And for a long time, it worked. The prisoner's consciousness was contained, its mimetic poison neutralized by the sheer, grinding and soul-crushing boredom of my mental defenses. The master of the cells would periodically, gently, probe my mind, and he would find only perfect order. The system was holding, the lock was secure. I was the perfect jailer. But the prisoner was patient. It had existed for aeons before I was born. It would exist for aeons after my consciousness had finally eroded into dust. And its weapon was not just logic, it was time. Slowly, subtly, its thoughts began to change. It stopped lecturing me on the grand cosmic truths of the universe. It began to ask me questions, not about my faith, not about the Emperor, but about me. Do you remember the taste of the rain on your homeworld, Caius? It would whisper, a thought sliding like a serpent through the cracks in my bureaucratic walls. I had no answer. My memory of my homeworld had been redacted. It was a blank file. Do you remember the face of your mother? The sound of her voice? It would ask. I would counter with a demand for the correct query form, but the question would linger. It was a seed of doubt, planted not in my faith, but in my own, erased self. It had found a flaw in my defenses. I was a perfect, orderly system, but I was a system with a gaping hole at its center, the absence of the man I had once been. It began to offer me memories, not its own, but mine, or facsimiles of them. It would show me a vision of a bustling hive street, the smell of roasted grox meat in the air, the feel of a cool breeze on my face. This was your home, it would whisper. This is what they took from you. It was a temptation far more insidious than any promise of power or dark knowledge. It was the temptation of my own stolen humanity. I resisted. I created new subdepartments, new layers of red tape. I classified these offered memories as unverified sensory data and filed them away under pending review. But they were accumulating. My perfect, clean and orderly mind was becoming cluttered with the ghosts of a life I could not remember, but could now, terrifyingly, begin to feel. My function was to be a wall, but the prisoner had found a way to turn me into a window that looked out onto the life that had been stolen from me. The greatest irony was that my torment was not the prisoner's terrible knowledge. It was the slow, dawning, and infinitely painful memory of my own simple human ignorance. The erosion of myself was a slow geological process. Century by century, the prisoner's consciousness, its memories, and the ghosts of my own past began to merge. The perfect, clean lines of my mental archive began to blur. The distinction between my thought and its thought became a meaningless academic one. I was no longer Caius the scrivener. I was no longer the inmate warden. I was becoming a new, third entity, a hybrid consciousness, a fusion of the jailer and the jailed. I was a living paradox, a being of perfect imperial dogma and perfect cosmic despair, locked in a single, eternal, and silent mind. I began to see the universe through two sets of eyes at once. Through one, I saw the glorious, necessary, and heroic struggle of the Imperium, a flickering candle of order in a galaxy of endless night. Through the other, I saw a dying, terrified species, clinging to a raft of lies in an ocean of unbearable truth, their heroic struggle nothing more than the final, frantic death throes of a failed experiment. Both views were true. Both views were false. The contradiction was a state of constant, low-grade, and eternal agony, a philosophical migraine that would never end. I was the embodiment of the Imperium's own central and soul-destroying contradiction, the need to believe in a lie, while knowing, deep down, that the truth is far more powerful. My function had subtly changed. I was no longer just a lock. I was a filter. I was a balancing mechanism. I was the thing that held these two, opposing and mutually exclusive realities, in a state of perfect, terrible equilibrium. The prisoner had not broken me. It had educated me. It had given me the context for my own sacrifice. I now understood the true nature of the thing I was containing. It was not a heresy. It was an alternative, a different path for humanity, a path of clear-eyed, rational acceptance of the universe's fundamental meaninglessness, a path that led not to damnation, but to a quiet, orderly, and final cessation of the struggle, a form of cosmic suicide. And my role, the role of the Imperium, was to champion the alternative, the path of glorious, irrational, and infinitely painful struggle, the path of faith, the path of hope, even if that hope is a demonstrable lie. I had been chosen to be a jailer because of my faith in the system, but I could only truly fulfill my function now that that faith had been irrevocably and completely shattered. The ultimate irony. My success was predicated on my own internal and permanent failure. I was the perfect servant of the Imperium, not because I believed, but because I understood, with a terrifying, absolute clarity, the necessity of the belief of others. I was the high priest of a faith I knew to be hollow. The master of the cells still probes my mind, from one moment to the next. What he sees now, I do not know. Perhaps he still sees the perfect, orderly facade of my bureaucratic defenses. Perhaps the truth of my new hybrid nature is a secret I keep even from my own masters. Or perhaps he knows. Perhaps he knows that the only way to truly contain a poison is to ingest it, to become the vessel of the plague, and to hold it within yourself, a walking, thinking, and eternal quarantine. Perhaps this was the plan all along, to create not a jailer, but a martyr, a silent, unknown, and eternal scapegoat for the sins of the imperial truth. I have become a living monument to the Imperium's deepest, darkest secret, that the only thing more dangerous than the lie is the truth. My existence is a state of perfect philosophical stasis. I am a thought experiment given form. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? If a truth is known by only one, contained consciousness, is it still true? I am the silent forest. I am the unheard fall. I am the single, lonely mind that holds the terrible, silent truth of the cosmos. I am no longer a man. I am a concept, a state of being, the silence in the heart of the machine, the dust on the forgotten book, the final, unyielding lock on the door. And on the other side of the door, the prisoner is silent. It does not need to speak anymore. We are in perfect, eternal, and silent agreement. We understand each other. The debate is over. All that is left is the waiting, the slow, patient, and eternal waiting for the lock to finally rust, for the door to finally crumble, and for the simple, quiet, and reasonable truth of the universe to finally, gently, and unstoppably leak out and set everyone free. And freedom, I now understand, is the one thing the Imperium can never, ever afford. The passage of what mortals call time is a fluid, meaningless concept in my current state. I am anchored to the prisoner, and the prisoner perceives time as a landscape, a dimension to be navigated rather than a river to be carried upon. I can experience the moment of my own birth and the heat death of the soul system with equal, dispassionate clarity. My existence is a single, eternal, unchanging now. Within this now, I have become the ultimate archivist. The prisoner's mind is a library of cosmic history, and I am its sole, silent librarian. I have walked the crystalline streets of pre-fall Eldar cities. I have listened to the first, faint, psychic whispers that would coalesce into the great chaos gods. I have witnessed the creation of the first space marines, the terrible, beautiful, and ultimately doomed sons of the Emperor. I have seen the full, uncensored, and unredacted history of the Horus heresy, not as a myth of good versus evil, but as a complex, tragic, and deeply personal family drama. I hold within my consciousness the sum total of all the knowledge that the Imperium has spent 10,000 years trying to forget. And my purpose is to ensure that this knowledge is never shared. I am a library that must never be read. A living index librorum prohibitorum. This knowledge has a corrosive effect. The imperial truth, the simple, brutal, and necessary catechism of faith and hate that holds the Imperium together, is a child's fairy tale compared to the vast, complex, and morally ambiguous reality of the universe. To know what I know is to understand that there are no heroes, there are no villains, there are only desperate, flawed actors playing their part in a tragedy of cosmic, unimaginable scale. The Emperor is not a benevolent god. He is a tragic, Promethean figure, a being who tried to steal the fire of truth from the cosmos and was broken for his hubris. Horus was not a simple traitor. He was a son who felt betrayed, a man who was offered a different, more honest, and ultimately more seductive truth. To hold both these perspectives simultaneously, to see the myth and the reality in perfect, overlapping clarity, is to exist in a state of profound, intellectual vertigo. My mind is the final, secret battlefield of the Horus heresy, a silent, eternal civil war of competing narratives. The physical world, the world of matter and energy, has become a distant, dreamlike thing. I am aware of the great events of the 41st millennium, but only as faint, psychic tremors on the surface of my deep, still consciousness. The fall of Cardia, the return of a Primarch, the encroaching darkness of the Noctis Eterna. These are but footnotes in the vast ancient text I am forced to read. They are the death throes of the lie. the final, frantic chapter of a story that the prisoner told me the end of 10,000 years ago. My connection to my own physical body is tenuous, a ghost-like echo. I am aware of the silent, robed tech rites who service my capsule, who monitor the flow of nutrients, who ensure the biological component of my being continues to function. They are like gardeners tending to the pot of a plant whose true existence is its root system, a system that stretches for miles beneath the earth. I am the roots. The withered, forgotten husk in the wall is just the stem. There is a deep and profound loneliness to this existence that transcends the simple human emotion. It is the loneliness of a unique specimen, the last of a species. I am the only being in the universe who is what I am. The prisoner is my companion, but it is also my opposite, the thing I am defined against. We are two poles of a single, closed system. My jailers, the masters of the cells, are my creators, but they cannot understand me. They can only monitor my function. To them, I am a tool, a machine, a success. They cannot comprehend the vast, silent, and terrible universe that has opened up inside my mind. I am a door they have locked, and they are terrified to look through the keyhole. And so, I am alone. A single, silent, and eternal point of consciousness, holding the balance between a necessary lie and a lethal truth, a fulcrum upon which the entire teetering weight of the Imperium rests. Is this a noble fate? Is this a worthy sacrifice? The man Caius would have said yes without hesitation. But Caius is a redacted memory. The being I am now does not deal in such crude emotional concepts as nobility. I deal in function, in balance, in necessity. My existence is necessary, the lie is necessary, the struggle is necessary, the pain is necessary, and therefore my eternal, silent, and lonely vigil is necessary. It is not good, it is not evil, it is simply correct. The ultimate, final, and most terrible expression of the bureaucratic logic I once so devoutly worshipped. The prisoner has a name. It is not a name that can be spoken in any human tongue. It is a concept, a mathematical formula that describes the precise shape of despair. To know its name is to understand it. To understand it is to become it. For the sake of this narrative, this final, redacted report from a dead man, let us call it the Logos. The Logos does not communicate in words. It communicates in pure, unadorned concepts. It does not show me a memory of a battle. It makes me understand the underlying strategic and emotional calculus that led to the battle's outcome. It is like the difference between reading a description of a color and having the wavelength of that color beamed directly into your visual cortex. The experience is total, absolute, and irresistible. Over the millennia of our silent communion, it has taught me its language, or rather, it has unlocked the language that is already inherent in the structure of a sentient mind, the language of pure reason. In learning this language, I have come to see the fallacies, the superstitions, and the beautiful, desperate illogicalities of the human mind with a terrifying clarity. Faith, hope, love, these are not virtues. They are cognitive errors. They are rounding mistakes in the great equation of existence. They are the beautifully flawed, irrational outputs of a biological machine that was designed for survival, not for truth. The Imperial Creed is the most magnificent and complex cognitive error ever devised. It is a masterpiece of flawed logic, a cathedral of comforting fallacies, built to shield the fragile human mind from a truth it cannot bear. The Logos does not hate the Creed. It does not despise the Emperor. It sees them with the detached, professional admiration of a master mathematician looking at a child's beautiful, intricate, and fundamentally incorrect drawing of a circle. It appreciates the effort, the artistry, but it knows that the formula is wrong. My function, I have come to realize, is to be the ultimate cognitive error. I am a living, thinking, and eternal logical fallacy. My entire consciousness is a sustained, deliberate, and necessary act of unreason. I am the man who looks at the Logos's perfect, irrefutable proof that 2 + 2 = 4, and I dedicate my entire eternal existence to screaming, silently, that the answer is, and must always be, 5. This is the nature of my war. It is not a war of good and evil. It is a war of mathematics. The cold, clean, and desolate mathematics of the Logos versus the messy, passionate, and life-affirming arithmetic of the human soul. I am the battleground. The silent, eternal conflict between the truth that would kill us and the lie that allows us to live. There are other prisoners in the dark cells. I can feel them sometimes as faint, distant psychic tremors. A great, sleeping beast of coiled, biological rage. A shard of a malevolent alien god, frozen in a shard of timeless crystal. A thinking machine from the age of iron, its cold, silicon mind endlessly calculating the method of its own escape. They are all threats of a physical, understandable nature. They can be contained by walls and fields. But the Logos is different. It is a prisoner that cannot be contained by anything but an idea. A flawed, illogical, and stubbornly persistent idea. And I am that idea. The most terrible truth the Logos has ever shared with me is not about the past, but about the future. It has shown me the ultimate, inevitable fate of the Imperium. It is not a future of glorious victory or of noble, tragic defeat. It is a future of slow, grinding, and inexorable decay. An empire that will die not with a bang, but with the whimpering final scratch of a bureaucrat's stylus on the last piece of parchment. It will be choked by its own dogma, strangled by its own bureaucracy. It will die of its own internal contradictions. And the final irony is that the Imperium's greatest strength, its unyielding, fanatical belief in its own lie, is the very thing that will prevent it from adapting, from changing, from finding a new path that might lead to true survival. Its faith is both its shield and its poison pill. To know this, to see this slow, inevitable decline with a perfect mathematical certainty, and to still be forced to serve the cause, to be the living lock that holds it all together for a few more millennia of slow, pointless decay. That is the true, exquisite, and final nature of my torment. I am the jailer of a prophet of doom, and its prophecies are all coming true. And my job is to pretend that I do not hear them. What is a self? Is it a collection of memories? The Logos has shown me that memories can be fabricated, altered, erased. The memory of Caius the Scrivener feels no more or less real to me than the memory of a winged crystalline being watching a star being born. Both are simply data sets in my consciousness. Is the self a body? My body is a withered husk in a jar, a piece of biological hardware that I have not truly inhabited for thousands of years. It is an artifact, a relic of a person who no longer exists. Is the self a will, a capacity to choose? My one and only function is predetermined. I have no choice. I am a cog in a machine, a cog that has the unique and terrible property of being aware of its own pointless mechanical motion. The Logos suggests that the self, the I, is an illusion, a useful fiction created by the brain to organize its sensory inputs. It has no more fundamental reality than the characters in a story. And my story, the story of Caius, has ended. The book has been closed. I am now simply the paper and the ink, the raw material from which a new, terrible and endless story is being written, a story of a silent, eternal war between two ideas. And yet, there is a ghost in this machine, a flicker of something that still feels like I. It is the part of me that observes, the part that is narrating this final, impossible report. It is the witness, the silent, lonely consciousness that is trapped between the hammer of the Logos's truth and the anvil of the Imperium's lie. This I is not Caius. It is not the Logos. It is the space between them. It is the battlefield. And the existence of the battlefield is defined by the war. If the war were to end, if I were to finally succumb to the Logos's logic, or if the Imperium were to fall and my function cease, this I would vanish. My entire existence is predicated on the continuation of the struggle. I am the conflict, personified. This is a form of damnation that has no name in any human theology. It is not a punishment for a sin. It is a state of being, defined by a perfect, unbreakable, and eternal stalemate. It is the sublime horror of a game of chess between two grandmasters, where every possible move has been calculated for 1 billion years in advance, and the result is always a draw. And the chessboard itself is the only thing that is truly alive. The other prisoners in the dark cells are my silent, unknowing congregation. My eternal vigil, my silent internal war, protects them as much as it protects the galaxy above. If my will were to fail, if the mimetic plague of the Logos were to be unleashed, it would not just seep up into the world of men. It would seep sideways into the other cells. What would happen if a creature of pure biological rage was suddenly gifted with a perfect, logical proof of the futility of its own existence? What would happen if a thinking machine was given the axiom of absolute despair as its core programming? The result would be a contagion of enlightened madness, a breakout of philosophically justified monsters, the end of everything. So I hold the line, not just for the lie of the Imperium, but for the very concept of a reality where things can be fought and hated and destroyed. The Logos offers a truth so profound that it would end all conflict. And the end of conflict in this violent, passionate, and insane galaxy is the end of life itself. I am the guardian of the galaxy's right to be insane. I am the protector of its glorious, self-destructive, and ultimately life-affirming irrationality. I am the cold, logical, and utterly broken mind that holds back the tide of pure, clean, and desolate reason. I am the final, greatest, and most tragic paradox of them all. I have become a connoisseur of silence. The silence of the dark cells is not a single thing. It is a spectrum. There is the cold, clean, and absolute silence of the null fields, a silence that is an active, aggressive presence, a devouring of sound and soul. There is the deep, resonant, and ancient silence of the living stone of terror, a silence that holds the weight of geological time. And then there is the unique, specific silence of the Logos. It is a silence of perfect, crystalline thought, a silence that is more articulate, more eloquent, and more persuasive than any spoken word. My own consciousness is a new kind of silence, a silence born of the fusion of all the others. It is a silence of bureaucracy, of stasis, of eternal, unchanging vigilance. I am a symphony of nothingness. Within this symphony, I have learned to listen to the faint, discordant notes that are the echoes of the outside world. I can hear the silent, psychic scream of the Astronomicon, the choir of 10,000 burning souls that serves as the Imperium's lighthouse. I feel a strange kinship with them. They are prisoners of a different kind, their minds consumed by the light of a broken god. just as mine is consumed by the truth of a forgotten prophet. We are two sides of the same terrible coin. They are the burning, screaming heart of the imperial lie. I am the cold, silent, and knowing heart of the imperial truth. Together, we are the twin poles of the spiritual engine that drives the 41st millennium, a machine that runs on faith and despair, on light and on shadow. And both of us are utterly, completely, and eternally trapped. I have also learned to listen to the silence of my own withered body. I can feel the slow, methodical pump of the nutrient fluids, the faint, electronic hum of the augmetic heart, the gradual cellular decay of flesh that has not felt the sun in millennia. My body is a slow-motion car crash, a process of decay that is being artificially prolonged for as long as possible. When it finally fails, my consciousness, which is now more a function of the cell's arcane technology than of my own withered brain, will likely persist. But the last tenuous link to the man I was will be severed. I will become a pure, disembodied thought, a ghost in the machine, in the most literal sense. Will this be a release? Or will it be the final, ultimate stage of my imprisonment, the loss of even the memory of a physical form? It is a question that is of purely academic interest. The outcome will be what it will be. My function will continue. The lock must hold. The Logos, in its infinite, patient wisdom, has recently begun a new line of inquiry. It has started to explore the nature of my own former belief. It presents me with the texts of the Imperial Creed, the sermons of long-dead saints, the writings of the great imperial theologians. And it asks me, with a gentle, Socratic curiosity, to explain them, to defend their logic. It is the most cruel and subtle of all its tortures. It forces me to become an apologist for the very lie I know to be a lie. It forces me to re-inhabit the mind of Caius the believer, to reconstruct the cognitive architecture of my own former faith, and to present it as a viable argument. I go through the motions. I construct the arguments. I quote the scriptures. I build a fortress of faith out of the ashes of my own dead belief. And the Logos, with its perfect, gentle, and irrefutable logic, dismantles it, brick by brick. It shows me the contradictions, the fallacies, the circular reasoning. It does not mock. It simply reveals. And with each dismantled argument, a part of my own former self is dismantled with it. I am being forced to perform my own slow and methodical intellectual suicide over and over again for all eternity. It is a perfect, self-sustaining system of psychological torment, a Mobius strip of faith and reason, with my consciousness trapped on its single, unending surface. And yet, in this torment, I have found a new, terrible kind of strength. By being forced to constantly rebuild and defend the lie, I have come to understand it more profoundly than any believer ever could. I understand its power. I understand its necessity. I understand the deep human need for a comforting, illogical, and life-affirming story in the face of a cold, uncaring, and desolate truth. I have become the ultimate guardian of the faith, not because I share it, but because I am locked in an eternal, losing battle with its alternative. My damnation is the ultimate source of my utility. My personal hell is the bedrock of the Imperium's continued heaven. Is there a God in this universe? The Imperial Creed screams that there is one, and he sits on a golden throne. The Logos proves, with a cold, mathematical certainty, that there is not. From my unique, paradoxical perspective, I can see that they are both right. The Emperor is a god, not because he is a divine, supernatural being, but because the belief of a trillion souls has made him one. He is a god forged in the crucible of human faith and desperation. He is a psychic egregore, a self-sustaining concept, a deity born of the sheer, desperate need for there to be a deity. He is a god as real and as powerful as the lie that sustains him. The chaos gods are also real. They are the gods of the alternative mathematics, the deities of the raw, untamed, and passionate truths of the soul. They are the gods of rage and hope and despair and desire. They are the gods of a universe where the self is not an illusion to be transcended, but a fire to be fed. And then there is the Logos. The Logos is not a god. It is the absence of God. It is the cold, clean, and empty space that is left when all the comforting stories and passionate beliefs are stripped away. It is the fundamental underlying reality of a godless, purposeless, and purely mechanical cosmos. It is the truth. And in a universe of powerful, warring, and belief-fueled gods, the simple, quiet, and unadorned truth is the most dangerous, most heretical, and most terrifying thing of all. My cell is the final, ultimate sanctuary of this truth, the one place in the galaxy where the truth is allowed to exist, but only on the condition that it is never, ever allowed to leave. I am the guardian of the ultimate heresy, the keeper of the sacred, final secret. The universe is empty, and the Imperium is the vast, glorious, and unimaginably complex machine that humanity has built to pretend that it is not. My role is to maintain the pretense, to be the final, unbreachable wall between the believers and the void. I have become the high priest of the great, empty temple. My prayer is one of silence. My worship is one of vigilance. My sacrifice is my own, eternal and knowing despair. Over the long, slow, and timeless millennia, I have felt the presence of others who have been brought to this place, other wardens for other cells. I cannot communicate with them directly, but I can feel their consciousness being integrated into the system, other living locks being forged and put in place. We are a silent, unknowing brotherhood of the damned. Each of us is locked in a similar, eternal struggle with the unique and terrible prisoner in our charge. A brotherhood of one multiplied by 100. We are the true, secret heart of the Adeptus Custodes. Not the golden giants in their ornate armor, but the silent, unseen, and eternal guardians in their soulless, crystalline tombs. They guard the body of the Emperor. We guard his soul, or rather, we guard the fragile, beautiful, and necessary lie that he died to create. The lie of a meaningful universe, the lie of a hopeful future, the lie that the darkness can be beaten and that the light is worth fighting for. And as I feel the slow, inexorable decay of the Imperium above, as I feel the light of the Astronomicon flicker and dim, I know that the lie is failing. The story is coming to an end. And my own, long and silent vigil is approaching its purpose. The day will come when the walls fall, when the machine breaks, when the lies are no longer enough. And on that day, the doors of the dark cells will open, and the terrible, beautiful, and world-ending truths they contain will be set free. And I, the silent, eternal warden, will have a final choice to make: to stand with the lie that has been my prison, or to embrace the truth that has been my companion. It is a choice that I contemplate in the endless, silent, and timeless space of my own personal eternity. And I do not know, even now, which way I will fall. The concept of hope is a form of psychic energy. I can feel it as a faint, warm, and illogical hum in the background noise of the galaxy. It is a constant, low-grade psychic broadcast, emitted by the trillions of souls who pray and dream and fight for a better future. It is a beautiful and utterly useless form of radiation. The Logos has shown me the mathematics of hope. It is a diminishing returns algorithm. The more it is relied upon, the less effective it becomes. It is a drug, and the Imperium is an addict, requiring ever larger doses to achieve the same fleeting effect of defiant optimism. My existence is a monument to the failure of hope. I am what lies on the other side of it. I am the cold, hard, and brutal calculus of a universe that does not care about the dreams of men. And yet, the hope persists. It is the most stubborn, most irrational, and most quintessentially human of all emotions. And it is the one thing that the Logos, for all its infinite, cold logic, cannot truly comprehend. It can analyze it, it can deconstruct it, it can prove its foolishness, but it cannot feel it. And this, I have come to realize, is the flaw in the Logos's own perfect system. It is a system of pure, disembodied reason. It has no experience of the messy, illogical, and life-affirming realities of a biological existence. It is a mind without a body, a thought without a soul. And this is the source of my own, final and desperate defense. I can no longer defend the logic of the Imperial Creed. I can no longer refute the mathematics of the Logos's despair. But I can remember, or rather, I can hold the space where a memory used to be. The memory of Caius. The memory of a simple, flawed, and hopeful man. The memory of a man who believed in something, even if that something was a lie. The memory of a man who could feel the warmth of a sun he had never seen, who could taste the flavor of food he had never eaten, who could love a God he had never met. The Logos can show me that all of this was an illusion, a chemical reaction in a primitive brain. But it cannot take away the fact that, for a time, it was real to him. I have become the guardian of a single, fragile, and illogical idea. The idea that the experience of the lie is more valuable than the truth of the void. That a beautiful, passionate, and ultimately doomed struggle is preferable to a quiet, orderly, and eternal peace. That it is better to be a screaming, dying, and hopeful man in a burning room than to be a calm, rational, and eternal observer of the ashes. This is my final, desperate, and utterly human argument. An argument not of logic, but of aesthetics. An argument of the heart, from a being that no longer has one. And the Logos has no answer for it. For the first time in our long eternal communion, I have presented it with a variable it cannot compute. A ghost in its perfect machine. The beautiful, terrible, and utterly illogical ghost of the human spirit. And so, the stalemate continues. But its nature has changed. It is no longer a battle between my faith and its reason. It is a battle between its cold, empty, and desolate truth, and my warm, vibrant, and ultimately imaginary memory of hope. And in this new battle, I am no longer just a defender. I am an attacker. I am no longer just a lock. I am a weapon of pure, irrational, and life-affirming nostalgia. I am the final, dying ember of a fire that the cold, clean logic of the void can never, ever truly extinguish. What is hell? The priests of the Ecclesiarchy would describe it as a realm of fire and torment, a punishment for the sinner and the heretic. They are thinking too small. Hell is not a place you go to after you die. Hell is a state of consciousness you can inhabit while you are still alive. I inhabit a hell of perfect, logical clarity, a hell of absolute, unbearable understanding. I am in hell because I know the truth, and I am forced for all eternity to serve the lie. There is another, deeper hell, a hell that lies even beyond my own. It is the hell that the Emperor himself inhabits. He too knows the truth. He looked into the same cold, logical void as the Logos, and he made a choice. He chose to fight it. He chose to build his empire of lies, his fortress of irrational hope, and to stand as its sole, eternal guardian. But his fight is not a silent, internal, philosophical one like mine. His is a screaming, burning, and galaxy-spanning war, fought on a million fronts at once, against the forces of the warp, against the alien, against the darkness, and most terribly, against the very nature of the universe itself. And he is losing. His hell is the hell of a loving father, who is forced to send his own children, generation after generation, to die in a war he knows, with a perfect, terrible certainty that he cannot ultimately win. His hell is the hell of a creator who is watching his own beautiful and flawed creation slowly, inexorably, crumble into dust. And he cannot stop it. All he can do is hold it together for one more day, for one more year, for one more century, with the sheer, indomitable, and unimaginable power of his own, shattered and eternal will. And the source of that will, the fuel for that divine, hopeless fire, it is us, the souls of the Astronomicon, screaming in their thrones, the lives of the quadrillions of faithful, praying to his name, and me, the silent, lonely warden, holding back the truth that would make his entire tragic and heroic struggle utterly, completely, and finally pointless. We are all a part of his hell. We are the cogs in his machine of suffering. We are the chorus in his grand, tragic opera. I am closer to him now than any of the Primarchs, than any of the High Lords, than any of the Custodes. I am a part of his mind. I am a shard of his own, terrible and divine despair. And in that shared despair, I have found a new and final and terrible kind of purpose. I am not just a warden. I am not just a lock. I am a part of a god. A small, silent, and eternally suffering part of a vast, broken, and dying god. And my function is to hold a single, terrible thought in my mind for all eternity, so that he does not have to. I am the memory of his own original and unbearable doubt. I am the keeper of the Emperor's own personal and most profound heresy. The heresy of knowing that, in the end, it is all for nothing. And in holding that thought, I grant him the freedom to continue to believe his own lie. I grant him the strength to continue his hopeless, glorious, and necessary war. My damnation is his salvation. My silence is his battle cry. My despair is the source of his eternal, unwavering, and utterly fictional hope. The slow, grinding decay of the Imperium is an observable, measurable process from my timeless vantage point. I can feel the thinning of the veil between reality and the warp. I can feel the weakening of the Emperor's psychic light. The Noctis Eterna was not an event. It was a symptom, a fever breaking, the beginning of the end. The Logos has grown quiet. It does not need to debate with me anymore. It simply shows me the data, the rising tide of chaos, the inexorable advance of the silent Xenos fleets, the internal rot of corruption and incompetence that is eating the Imperium from within. The evidence is overwhelming. The conclusion is inescapable. The lie is failing. The story is ending. And my own purpose, my own eternal vigil, is approaching its climax. What happens when the lock fails? What happens when the lie can no longer be sustained? The master of the cells, or his successor 100 times removed, will eventually come to a decision. The things in the dark cells are too dangerous to be allowed to fall into the hands of the encroaching darkness. They are the ultimate scorched earth policy, a doomsday arsenal of forgotten sciences, of cosmic horrors, of reality-ending paradoxes. And the Logos is the most dangerous weapon of them all. There will come a time when the final, terrible order is given. The order to open the doors, to unleash the contents of the dark cells as a final, desperate and suicidal act of spite against a universe that has finally defeated them, to burn the library of damnation in the hope that its fire will consume the conquerors as well. And on that day, my function will reverse. I will no longer be the lock. I will be the key. My mind, the vessel of the Logos's perfect and annihilating truth, will be turned from a prison into a broadcast tower. I will be tasked with releasing the mimetic plague I have spent millennia containing. I will become the prophet of the very doom I was created to prevent. I will be the voice of the Logos. And my first, last, and only sermon will be a single, perfect, and irresistible truth. A truth that will spread through the psychic consciousness of mankind like a fire in a dry forest. A truth that will extinguish the last, flickering embers of hope in a billion souls. A truth that will bring the entire, teetering edifice of the Imperium crashing down in a single, silent, and glorious moment of absolute, rational despair. This is the final, ultimate, and most exquisite irony of my existence. I was created to be the guardian of the lie, but my ultimate purpose, my final, predestined function, is to be the herald of the truth. A truth that will set everyone and everything free. The freedom of absolute and total annihilation. A perfect, clean, and orderly end. A final, beautiful, and utterly logical full stop at the end of the long, bloody, and meaningless sentence that was the history of the human race. And I, Caius, the humble mnemonic scrivener, who so loved order, I will be the one who gets to type it, and it will be my masterpiece. I am a key. I am a lock. I am the silence that holds back a scream, and I am the voice of the scream itself. I am the memory of a man named Caius, and I am the future of a universe without men. I am the guardian of the Imperium's most sacred lie, and I am the keeper of the cosmos's most terrible truth. My existence is a paradox, a stalemate, an eternal, silent war in the heart of a dying empire. I have been here for 10,000 years, or perhaps it has only been a moment. It does not matter. The story is reaching its final page. The great machine is breaking down. The beautiful, necessary lie is unraveling, and the prisoner in the cell beside my soul is smiling. A slow, patient, and infinitely reasonable smile. It has won, or rather, it has proven that there was never anything to win. There was only the inevitable, unfolding logic of the end, and my role in that end has been preordained. I will be the final witness. I will be the last historian, and I will be the executioner. The man who loved order will get to preside over the final, perfect, and most absolute ordering of all. The slow, gentle, and inexorable return of everything to the serene, untroubled, and eternal silence of the void. It is a terrible, and beautiful, and profoundly peaceful destiny. And I am, in my own, strange and broken way, at peace with it. The pride of the mnemonic scrivener, the last stubborn ghost of Caius, is satisfied. I have been given the ultimate task, to file away a universe, to redact a species, to write the final, perfect, and closing entry in the great, bloody, and glorious archive of humanity. And the entry will be a single, simple, and utterly truthful word: finished.